On the outskirts of northwest Sydney, there are still vast areas of greenery. One such suburb is Oakville, which is situated next to Shayville National Park. Human habitation is limited to 5-acre blocks, which has allowed biodiversity of flora and fauna to thrive. Come rain, hail or shine, all creatures great and small go about their business in their native paradise. The Australian magpie, whose closest relative is the butcherbird, is one such animal which thrives on living in the Australian bush. Dads look after the hatchlings while mum takes a well-earned break in the nest. It often is like in human families where older sibling gives junior a swipe on the way through. And despite Oakville being acknowledged as green country, it was hard to ignore the cranes in the next suburb of Vineyard as development creeps closer. So, strategic planner Stephanie Lum, who works for a local council in Sydney, was consulted to find out what's driving development in northwestern Sydney.
Particularly in local government, you get a lot of directives from the state governments. They say, well, councils, you need to create a new policy or satisfy these policy objectives, and I guess councils have to satisfy that. And there's the South District plans, which provide overall policy objectives for Sydney. All councils need to ensure that they comply with those policy objectives. For example, targets for the number of dwellings they need to provide for the future.
Now aware of what was driving development, it was now time to see which areas were becoming built up. And what better way to see this than along the train line? From Vineyard to Riverstone is largely untouched. Although infrastructure such as work at Riverstone Business Park has begun to accommodate 90,000 approved homes yet to be built at Riverstone West. Worley Parsons' Senior Environmental Planner Claire Jones, who's consulting with this project, elaborates further.
The Riverstone West precinct is one of at least a dozen or more kind of precincts which is called within the Northwest growth area. State government led planning exercise to kind of rezone mostly kind of former rural land into residential, commercial, industrial kind of precincts to support Sydney's population growth.
Miss Jones also said the land behind Riverstone to the west is largely untouched due to it being flood prone, and if a 100-year flood was to happen, it would be underwater for a considerable amount of time. So vast tracts of grazing land for cattle and horses remain on this site, and if council was to develop this land, she said it would have to be raised at considerable cost to them. It was time to push on and hit the train tracks again from Riverstone to nearby Quakers Hill. And semi-rural land had made way or was making way for new homes and suburbia. Both Schofields and Quakers Hill stations are now major hubs in the northwest suburbs. And after a quick turnaround at Quakers Hill, it was time to head back to Riverstone to visit the heritage-listed Riverstone train station and cottages from the now-defunct Meatworks site.
The Riverstone Meatworks still has significance to the local community. So apart from the Meatworks building site itself, but there was associated kind of buildings constructed, such as the former butcher's shop on Garfield Road, the former manager's residence, and a group of workers' cottages. So those three sites have been identified as statutory heritage items. The idea is to conserve and retain those heritage items, even in the context of the redevelopment of Riverstone.
There was one more trip to undertake from Vineyard to historic Richmond. There was much greenery along the way, and it appeared relatively untouched by development. And once again, many heritage buildings will ensure future development will have to be built around the heritage sites at Richmond. It appears the three councils, Blacktown, Hillshire and the Hawkesbury, whose boundaries are within the areas visited, have set aside corridors and wildlife areas for conservation. As for Oakville, Claire Jones said, it's not in the current strategic plans and it won't be developed in the near future.